Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Around South Jersey. I've got a good friend as my special guest this evening, Lou Magazzu, attorney at law, who is practicing in a new realm, I guess, Lou, you would say, that's come up. Tell us a little bit about how you got involved.
Well, first of all, Jim, it's great to see you.
It's good to see you, my friend.
You and I
got the Millville tie.
I did. I did this. I when in Millville, wear the, the orange and blue. But somebody once asked me if it was a Princeton tie. I said, no, it's Millville.
Well, yeah, it's funny you say that because the Princeton head coach is Tony Cerase's son, who is a former Millville graduate. So I don't know if he took orange and blue with him or it was already there. No, it was already there.
So I was thinking, you and I have known each other since I think around 1982. When did you first run for fielder?
Yeah, that's exactly right. 81 I ran, 81. And 81 I lost, 82 I won.
And the reason I remember, and then we'll talk about my stuff, but I was sitting behind you when they used to swear in the freeholders at the courthouse.
Yeah.
And you had just lost close in 81.
Yes.
And right. I remember saying, next year will be your year.
But did you know the story behind that?
No.
Oh, my God, Lou.
Maybe I knew and forgot.
Well, what happened was...
Well, you promised it and didn't get it?
Yeah, well, this is the truth. Honest, I've told this on TV before. On 81, I'm rookie. I don't know that I can't beat Harry Freitag, and it's 6-1 Democrats. So Chuck Fisher took us to the Grand Old House at lunchtime about a week before the election. Well, Ed Salmon was running, Gary Zimmerman, John Renard, Sheriff Castellini. So he's going around the room, and he goes... Gary, you're a winner. John, you're a winner. Ed, you're a winner. He was wrong there. And Sheriff, you're a winner. And he got to me and he said, you can't win. And I'm like, I'm 30-some years old. I'm like, what? And then on the way out, he felt bad. So he came over and put his arm on my shoulder. He said, don't worry about it. John Rose is going to retire, and we're going to appoint you to his position. I thought, geez, this is great. I can't lose, right? Then I find out they don't always tell the truth because our good friend didn't want me on the ticket with him. The guy that was running the next year, and I understand because we were both basically Millville people. He wanted Marv Padgett from Bridgeton. And I said, you know what? I'm going to run against the entire Democratic Party in a primary. And I did, and I won.
Well, I have a similar story involving both individuals, and everybody's friends now, so it doesn't. I don't say this with any malice. In 1987, Ed Salmon approached me to run for freeholder from Vineland. And that was the same year that Gary Zimmerman was running, Marv Padgett was running, Claire Miller was running. Okay. And I remember saying to Ed, I can't beat those guys, because I was a young kid. I was 30 years old,
yeah.
Okay? And Ed said, well, don't worry about it. I'm going to get elected to the assembly.
Oh, that's right.
And you can have my seat.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I went to go see Chuck after Ed lost. Chuck Fisher, God rest his soul, who, by the way, when I was director, I played a role in making sure that we named the complex after him because he made a big contribution. Yeah. So Chuck had the little office in the courthouse. Remember that little office he had in the courthouse?
Sure.
It was like a closet,
yeah.
Okay? So I went to go see him. And he said, and I told Douglas this story, and Michael, both his sons. And he said, I said, Director, I'd like to be considered for the position. Well, why do you think you should be? I said, well, Ed Salmon told me. He said, Ed Salmon can get you a vote get you a bill sponsored in the legislature, but he doesn't have a vote as a freeholder. And then he said to me, and I remember it like it was yesterday, he said, you seem like a nice boy. He said, your time will come. He said, it's not going to be now. He said, I got a good friend by the name of, God rest his soul, Bill Biondi, who I want to be my running mate.
Oh,
he said, you will cause me heartburn. He said, I'm an old man. I don't want any heartburn. Your time will come. Well, then fast forward years later when I served with Douglas, and Doug was a little annoyed with me once, and I told him the story. I said, I'm your father's last gift to you.
Yeah.
So anyway.
I do remember that story.
Oh, it was great. But, the thing about this, and, we've done this for a long time. You did it a little bit longer than me.
How many years were you on?
I was a freeholder 15 years. I actually...
Me too. That's how many I had.
Okay.
But I did 9, and then I lost. This was another interesting story. Jimmy Parent, who was very much, in the election board and very good on that stuff. After it was 85 at Salmon and I ran. 82 we won easily.
Right.
85 was the Tom Kane landslide.
You guys are the only two Democrats who won the whole state.
Exactly.
Not even Camden County.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, I remember
yes,
that.
you remember that. And then Jim said to me, he said, Jim, if you can win at 85, you'll never lose. 1991, guess who came? Your buddy Jimmy Florio. He taxed toilet paper. Yeah, he was a good guy. And I was out at 81.
Well, yeah, I actually, interesting little side note, Kim Wood, or I think Kim told me this story, either Kim or Ken McCouch, I forget. I was the longest serving consecutive term freeholder, even beyond Chuck, because Chuck passed away without filling out his whole term.
Right, yeah, I took over as director when he passed away.
But you know, and I know we'll get to business, but I got to talk about our John Rose story. Okay? Just because I tell this story, by the way, everywhere throughout the state, not a lot anymore, but when John wanted to be county chairman against our other friend, Joe DeMarco, right? Yeah. We all have become friends after, exactly. You know, in the trenches. And Jim Florio had just won for governor. I ran his campaign. Joe supported Tommy Smith. There's a name.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah. He had him on my show. Exactly.
Joe thought he was going to be I don't know what kind of cabinet member. God bless him. So Florio said, I don't want him to be chairman. John Rose was my campaign manager. I want him to be chairman.
Oh, I see.
So Bobby Rose and I worked on that, and literally Bob brought a guy in from the hospital in an oxygen tank to vote, and we won by one vote. And Joe never let me forget it. He was good natured about it after a while. Said, you brought a guy in with an oxygen tank. But anyway, that's not why I'm here. I have been an attorney now for 40 years. Actually,
wow.
Yeah, that's what I say. Actually, this is my 41st year.
Where'd you go to college?
University of Maryland undergrad and Villanova Law School.
Okay.
And have had, I think, a varied career. I was a trial lawyer initially, representing the Playboy Casino, representing asbestos companies, Owens Corning, fiberglass, and then started getting into transactional work, cable TV, cellular telephone, then malls, assisted living facilities, and then became a freeholder. Before that, I was a municipal attorney, and then a freeholder. And in my years, particularly since 2000, and particularly since I left the board in 2010, I've developed a lot of transactional work, business, malls, hospital, hotels rather, and different kinds of things, Atlantic City hotels, non-casinos. And in 2018, a very good friend of mine was Governor Martin O'Malley from Maryland. And his former chief of staff was working for a company called Columbia Care, and they called me and they said, would I be interested in doing their local work to assist them in getting a project, which ultimately, by the way, is now in Vineland on Delsey Drive as the retail.
Oh, okay.
And the it's called cannabis now, I think.
Right.
And also on the boulevard is where they grow it. By the way, side story, they bought Jimmy Sorrow's old plumbing store.
I knew they did, yeah.
So it was interesting for me to be doing that deal. But anyway, Cumberland County is a very small world. I wasn't sure initially how I felt about it as a former prosecutor, as a father. Although certainly I inhaled in college, it was something I left behind me. When I became a lawyer, I just never did anything that was illegal, including illegal drugs, which it was at the time. And I met some folks so I was not sure about the medical at the time, and met some folks whose son had Tourette's. Tourette's is a brutal
thing. Absolutely.
And I met them at a conference, I think I was in Las Vegas, and they said it abated their son's Tourette's by like 75%.
Oh, that's super.
Changed his life. So I got into the medical, and then in 2019, I was going to do another medical application, and the client decided to pull out of New Jersey. And then 21, I guess, decided to get involved in what they call adult use. And I'm working on licenses throughout South Jersey. And New Jersey has allowed what they call tiers, where you can get a license for cultivation or retail or manufacturing, which is really processing, think of it. And then ultimately you're also, or you can have a lab. You can't have any of those three in a lab. or you could also have a license for, there's going to be soon distribution and delivery licenses. So I'm in the middle of about probably 6 or 8 projects right now throughout South Jersey. I've been fortunate. I've lectured around 20 locations throughout the country about New Jersey's cannabis laws. And it's, I believe a couple of things. One, I believe in a medicinal effect. I've seen it have a positive impact on people. And secondly, since it's legal in New Jersey, as a kind of a libertarian on people's rights, I'm for it. It doesn't mean that you should use it while you're driving. You shouldn't be impaired. You shouldn't go to work, with it. It should be, to me, it's the same rules as alcohol, except I think it's actually not nearly as, it can't hurt you the way that alcohol, I think, can. And it's been really extraordinary. I'm hopefully not going to work forever, but I'm certainly going to work another few more years. And I've identified this as an area that I have interest in, and people have been responding very well. It takes all of my skill sets, my economic development as a freeholder or a municipal attorney or planning and zoning, or even private sector, and blends all those skills.
That's a great
at one
point.
time.
Yeah, you've got a lot. Just, the best radio talk show host in South Jersey is watching.
The best radio show host in South Jersey.
Harry Hurley.
Oh, well, Harry Hurley is, listen, he was honored, deservedly so, I think, by the Radio Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he's super.
And, Harry, I remember when Harry broke in 90, I think it was around 94, it's because when I unsuccessfully ran for Congress, Frank Lobiondo kind of used me as a doormat for that election. It was the wrong year to run for Congress. That was the Newt Gingrich year.
Oh, okay.
And contract with America. But I remember Harry was a young guy and starting radio and early in the morning.
Yeah. And
full of enthusiasm. And I have to tell you, there's no better ambassador for Atlantic City than Harry Curley. Yeah. Listen, his politics are a little more conservative than mine, but when it comes to doing the right thing, there is no such thing as a Democrat or Republican or liberal or conservative when you want to see an area grow, when you want to see economic development, when you see good-paying jobs. And Harry is just a spectacular ambassador.
Yeah.
And I every once in a while I send him congratulations when he's on Fox. He'll get to do the national stuff.
Right. And
I keep on ribbing him, when are you going to get your own show? Which, by the way, Tucker Carlson's gone, Harry. Maybe there's a shot for that hour.
That would be nice.
But, Harry's a great guy.
And he mentioned good host, great guest. Thank you, Harry, for both those comments. But speaking of Harry, I'm sure you saw the video clip of when they opened the first dispensary where they can sell in Atlantic City. My God, the line was a mile long, which is great.
Even Columbia Care and Delsey Drive, when they opened that up, they had to assign police officers on Delsey Drive because it was just insane. There's a couple of thoughts about cannabis. First of all, a couple of things. Towns had to either opt in, and most did not.
Yes.
Only about 20 to 25% opted in. And some were even more restrictive and said, you can cultivate here or you can process here, but you cannot sell retail here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I totally respect. I represent a client in Galloway Township, and and by the way, every governing body it's been a joy to meet with. But Galloway, what's really interesting, they said no outdoor, and my client wanted to do outdoor. And once I met with my client, I said, listen, instead of throwing a rock up a hill, let's meet with them. And Galloway, and I talk about this, and Harry, if you talk to your friends in Galloway, mention it to them, they've done it exactly right. They were deliberative, they considered it, but then they said, okay, we're going to open it up in a limited way, and we're only going to open it up at this point for cultivation, not retail. Now, my hope is that more places will open up for retail, and one of the arguments I make on retail is it's actually the safest place in your city because there's what's called security protocols.
Right.
There's lights. It's as safe as a bank. You literally have to have a vault.
Yeah.
And there has to be what's called SOPs, standard operating procedures, for security. They hire security experts. I typically recommend a guy who's done hundreds and hundreds nationally, has done over 100 communities as a presenter in the state of New Jersey. But I understand communities want to take it slow. Listen, I was a municipal attorney for 15 years. I was a county official for 15 years. I get that sometimes you want to just see how your neighbors are doing first.
Right.
However, I will tell you, those who come in first are going to enjoy, there's a 2% override for the community.
Right.
And there's also some other host benefits that will be helpful, as well as good paying jobs. You know, one of the things, and I've seen this in and out of communities, and it's really smart, they say, we want you to give a preference to our residents first.
Yeah.
And
Jobs,
the way
yeah.
that I design my applications is the municipality first, and then the counties and the surrounding areas. But there are also certain classes of folks who can get what's called a micro license and a social equity license. There's a preference for folks that have had marijuana convictions.
Oh, wow.
To give them an opportunity, kind of a leg up. Now, not a non-violent. I want to be clear. It can't be robbery or anything.
Right.
It's got to be just basically you were
Possession.
caught. Yeah. And 2 disorderlies or 1 felony, you have the opportunity to ask for a license. Now, the challenge that those people have, and I don't mean this disrespectfully,
Sure.
but they don't have access to money.
Yeah, I was
and
gonna
they don't
say,
have the
yeah.
experience of operating. So what I'm seeing, and I think the model will be in New Jersey, is a combination of having folks that have experience from outside the state, coupled with people who get licenses from within the state. And I think who have either social equity, women and minority, disabled vets. I'm so happy they made this part of the criteria. If you're a disabled veteran, you get a special criteria if you apply for a cannabis license.
Oh, that's great.
So I think that's important. This is a new area, but I think it's not new in other parts of the state, and hopefully we've learned from other parts of the state. I happen to think, and I was interviewed recently from the Inquirer, and I think the story's going to come out next couple of days, and I said I think New Jersey has a leg up for a couple of reasons. Number one, we learned from the rest of the country, the good and the bad. Number two, New Jersey has had 50 years with a regulated industry called casinos.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
And so we've learned about regulation.
Yeah.
And the one thing you have to say, and I give credit to Governor Byrne, God bless him, and others like Senator Bill Gormley, Senator Steve Persky, Judge Persky, they made sure there were regulations in place to make it as safe as possible. There's no hint of the mob or criminality.
Right, yeah.
So I think you have 50 years of learning about regulations, which I think has been helpful. And also, what else do we have in New Jersey? Pharmaceutical industry, also heavily
that's true.
regulated.
Yeah, right.
So, and the governor, I think, has done a spectacular job of putting good folks on there, including Kristen Nash, Christina Nash, who's been a super person, and a South Jersey person. And I think what you're seeing is there's an attention to detail to do it right, and they also did medical first, and learned on the medical side before. So I think they've done it as well as can be done. Listen, there's going to be mistakes, there's going to be problems, there's going to be hiccups like any new industry. But I think when I see this roll out, and by the way, I am somewhat knowledgeable now as I've traveled all over the country, and I can attest that New Jersey is as good or better than any other state in the union as its application of this.
It really is. We're talking with Lou Magazzu. We're talking about cannabis and, of course, the interesting factors that go along with that. We'll be back to talk more about what's happening here in South Jersey with the cannabis, and we'll do all that right after these messages.
Imagine living without pain. For over 35 years, Doctors Beebe and Doyle have helped thousands of people find relief from all types of pain. Millville Chiropractic Center has 4 doctors on staff specializing in hands-on or light-touch, drug-free pain relief methods. The examination, x-rays, therapies, and adjustments are all performed at one location. Schedule a consultation today. Enjoy life without pain and discomfort. Millville Chiropractic Center, the area's #1 pain relief center.
Complete Care has some big news to share with you,
We're here opening more locations and offering more services every day.
including our newest locations on Pearl Street in Bridgeton and High Street in Millville.
We're here with convenient, high quality, and accessible healthcare services all under one roof.
We're here just a call or email away.
We're here to provide compassionate care for you and your family.
We're here and we're ready when you are.
Complete Care Health Network, ready when you are.
I'm Brian Lankin, 3rd generation business owner, Al Shoes, been at the same location since 1961, our 61st year. We specialize in work boots, work shoes, orthopedic shoes, baby walking shoes, and school shoes. We go up to a men's 17 and a woman's 13. It's $5 off 25 and 10 off 100 if you mention that you've seen this.
The most important decisions a family can make are usually made around the kitchen table. At DeMarco Luisi Funeral Home, we believe pre-planning and the difficult decisions you face with the loss of a loved one should also be made around the comfort of a table, like a family. Our friendly, kind, and compassionate staff is committed to helping you get through this most difficult time. In your time of need, trust DeMarco Luisi Funeral Home, Vineland.
Welcome back to Around South Jersey. My special guest is Lou Magazzu, attorney who is representing several different cannabis companies. And Lou, we're talking about regulations, and one of the things that obviously, and I understand, you have to be careful where you put the retail. I thought Jim Sorrow's place is a great location, Oak Grove, Delsey Drive. It's not in a heavily populated neighborhood. So, you know, Nick Selden and I have talked about this too, like looking at areas, you know, like even South Vineland near the mall, there's a building there that's empty. And I don't know, I know Millville has approved one out, to, at least the growing facility out to the near.
Yeah, and by the way, let me correct myself. I was confusing South Jersey Powerful Women. I said Christina. It's Kristen Nash, and I was thinking of Christina Renna, who's also chairman of the South Jersey Chamber. So I wanted to correct those names. So it's interesting. First of all, I would take the position that, and I would invite anyone to. It's not. Those of us who are a certain age remember the head shops. This is nothing like that. To walk into a cannabis retail facility is like going into an AT&T, Comcast, iPhone store. If they've done right, that's what they're going to look like.
Right.
The other thing is you cannot display the cannabis. You can only display a facsimile, and it's all locked up in the back.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that, and as I said, there's security. There's typically a security officer. There's security cameras, more than you could possibly imagine. And there's a vault because it's really like having a bank there because of the value of the cannabis.
Yeah.
So I think that it's actually a very safe location. The other thing is that they share a lot in common with pharmacies.
Yeah,
okay.
good point.
So to me, a cannabis location, an ideal retail location, is a combination, is like an AT&T store, like a pharmacy, like a bank, all the same type of precautions that you're going to have. However, I also understand where they have written in, we don't want it to be too close to a park or too close to a school,
right?
Because we don't want it to be an attractive nuisance to students, to kids. We don't want them there,
right?
And I can respect that very much. The cultivation presents a whole other series of questions that are legitimate questions, specifically odor mitigation.
Yeah.
And I understand that, and I don't represent the folks who are running the Columbia Care facility anymore. I basically was the lawyer some years ago, but it got sold, and they have different lawyers. That there's been odor mitigation complaints. The technology has evolved dramatically in the last half a dozen years and continues to get better. But neighbors have a right to expect not to smell it. Now, that said, most cultivation facilities are being put in industrial parks where you can have anything. I mean, you could have a roof tar company and smell roof tar being made. Right. But that's still, notwithstanding that, I think they have an affirmative obligation to mitigate as best they can. The processors, there's very little odor at all because they're much smaller facilities. A cultivation facility can be as small as 2,500 square feet, which is called a micro, or as large as 150,000 square feet. Now, because of financing difficulties in the world right now, it costs about $350 to $400 a square foot to build one of these. So you're just not going to, there's not people with $40 or $50 million around. And what they're doing is they're typically phasing it in. 10, 15, 20, 25,000 square feet at a time. The processing facilities, interestingly, there's some that are as small as 500 square feet on what they call infusion. They take the oil and they put it in a beverage. New Jersey isn't there yet, but they will be. But they only require basically just like if you're going to do a beer or wine, just a barrel. But it's more sophisticated than that. But it doesn't take up a lot of space. And I think the other thing that's on the horizon, which is going to happen soon, is going to be consumption lounges. Where you
I
can
did
go
hear
in.
about
Yeah,
that. Yes,
yeah.
sort of like
And
where it goes.
now, in New Jersey, one of the few areas where I'm critical of the New Jersey regs is they don't allow for food at consumption lounges yet. Now, for those of you who remember back in the day, there's an absolute correlation between using cannabis and having a requirement to have some intake of food. We used to call it the munchies, okay? So I think that's going to have to change at some point. But, I think the state is right to do it slow, to do it correct, rather than to make mistakes that you can't unwind. But consumption will be next. And I think there will come 10 years from now where cannabis will not be substantially different than anything else.
Right.
Cultivation will be not much different than farming. Okay. Processing will be not much different than food processing. And retail will not be much different than an AT&T store. It's going to take a while to get there. It's going to take I think it takes a few things. It takes education. It frankly takes responsible operators. The worst thing you can have is an operator who allows odor to affect a cultivation site, or a retail operator who doesn't hire the right security. Now, frankly, and that's another important point, you need several levels of approval. You need to get a governing, first of all, you have to be zoned for it, and you need a letter from the zoning officer. Then you need a resolution from the governing body, okay? And then you need to get approval by the Cannabis Regulatory Commission, which has investigators, former assistant attorney generals, former state police officers, and so these are people that put you to a rigorous test. That you need to prove that you have security. You need to prove that you have a banking system that makes sense. That you have a cash payment system that makes sense. That you have an odor mitigation, et cetera, so forth. That you're hiring the right people. That you're training people. That's the other thing. There's tremendous amount of training that goes into this. Again, like you're going to work in a bank, like you're going to work in a food processing facility, like you're going to work in a cultivation facility as a farmer. And there's actually courses now. Rowan University has a curriculum.
Wow.
Stockton has a curriculum. Cooper Hospital has a medical interface with Rowan. All of these are coming together to take advantage of this industry and to take advantage of the opportunities of the industry. One of the things that I do with my applicants is to try to integrate our application with those places of education and training because we will make those places better and they will make my applicants as employers better.
Right. And I understand there's a lot of job opportunity, Lou, especially with cultivating.
And well-paid jobs.
Really? That's super.
They start at a minimum of about $20 an hour.
That's great.
Okay. And typically there's health benefits. I don't know if they have pensions, so to speak, yet, or retirement, but typically it's at $15 to $20 an hour or better, particularly if you're good at your craft as a cultivator. That is a little bit science and a little bit art. I couldn't grow a tomato plant, so I'm not the guy to talk to about it. But these folks who are really good at it are specialists, like a craft brewery. And that's the other thing I would say.
Yeah.
Think about these cannabis growers, particularly the smaller ones, as craft brewers. It's the same. They take great pride in what they sell. And there's even the capacity to make some for sleep, some for pain, different types of uses, and different dosages, so that depending on your capacity, your weight, your height, your age, you can literally, and that's the other thing, there are still doctors, and I encourage people who want to use it for medical to go see a doctor who's trained in this, and they will work with you, and you need to make sure that there's not any correlations or contraindications with medicine you're already on, for example. But the thing that I have learned, and it's funny, I'm usually the only guy in a suit at some of these conferences, not most of the time, but there's a great respect for what they call the plant, that it was natural. If you go through the history of cannabis, and I learned this recently, or in the last 4 or 5 years, that until 100 years ago, it was not regulated like a drug, like a pharmaceutical drug, and the pharmaceutical industry changed all that. And if you go into the Far East, if you go to other parts of the world, it's still seen as a way to, as a curative type of drug or a way to relax. I have seen folks testify to the fact that in terms of capacity, although it can relax you, it also does not have the debilitating effects the next day that alcohol would have. You don't have hangovers, things of that nature. So I think it's an alternative. The other thing that I've seen from firsthand is that it's an opportunity to get people off of heroin. People are afraid that cannabis is a gateway drug. I see it as an exit. It's an opportunity, and I've seen firsthand from someone I cared about very much who passed away, who, when she was on cannabis, she had no need for heroin. She ultimately died of a fentanyl overdose. And if she was allowed to have used cannabis, I believe she'd be alive today. And that, to me, makes it personal and makes me passionate about this. Yes, I do it as an attorney. Yes, I do it as a businessman. But I also have firsthand knowledge of how this is an alternative. And one of the things we need to do, and I'm hopeful to use to the extent that I have any influence and friends, to say we should use it, we should be testing this as an alternative, because they have something called C-Box. I'm forgetting the name. That they put people on, or they put them on other type of drugs, but they're still drugs. You're trading one drug for another. The plant is something that's natural, and you have the capacity to use it in a way that it doesn't take over your life and doesn't kill you.
A friend of ours just messaged to us, said, "Thank you, Jim and Lou. Cannabis is very worthy subject, and cannabis is saving her life regarding chronic pain and keeping her off the addictive pain medication," which is so important, because I had a person in my life who was addicted to oxycodone, and fortunately, to her credit, she was able to get away from it. Nick Asseldad said to me, he's been to the place in Vineland, and he said, "Jim, it was almost like walking into a jewelry store, because everything's under showcases, you can't touch it, but it would say, for medication, for this, for that, give you all the information you need." I know a very good friend of mine who fought cancer, and thank God she's in remission, is doing very, very well, but she had to have medical marijuana, and in order to keep the pain away.
Also brought back an appetite.
Yeah, that's true. She was 90 pounds, and now she's back to her beautiful self. That's a good
and
point.
that is another purpose of it. Well, I'm glad. Nick is also another friend, and he's a former jock, so he probably has some aches and pains here and there.
I'm sure he.
So I'm sure that he hopefully is making making good use of it. And Nick, if you're watching, or if you watch this later, I'm glad to have been of service to you.
I'm not saying he bought any, but he was in looking, and it was
well,
telling
actually,
me about it.
He may have somebody else buy it for him anyway. But
and that's a really good point, though, Lou. It is legal in New Jersey.
Absolutely.
And I know my youngest son,
at a certain amount.
Right.
A certain amount.
He had medical marijuana, which really helped him because he was in chronic pain. And that's what, our friend was just saying, with the chronic pain factor, what a blessing it is. Because, boy, when you're in pain, you'll do anything to get rid of that pain. And oxycodone.
And what an alternative to oxycodone.
It's a
and
natural
some of the Percocets and all these things that create terrible addictions and terrible cravings. Now, listen, I'm not trying to be that's a panacea to all things, and this is the greatest thing in the world. But from what I have seen and spoken with people, it's had a tremendous positive effect, and is an alternative to these terrible pharmaceutical drugs that just, they take people's lives away.
Yeah.
They take over their lives. Yeah. So, but one of the things, maybe we'll talk about after the next break, is to talk about the economic opportunities and the business opportunities. Tremendous economic opportunities, both for individuals and for communities.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We'll be back to talk about the economic opportunities for the individual, for the community, and much more right after these messages.
In Cumberland County, let's recycle right. We recycle cardboard, paper, aluminum, tin, and plastics number 1 and 2. Look for the 3-arrow triangle usually on the bottom of the plastic container. The number in the center determines the plastic number. Remember to recycle only number 1 and 2 plastics. Plastic bags, plastic film, hoses, and wires are not recyclable. They can damage sorting equipment and create hazardous working conditions. Don't trash our future. Do the right thing. Remember, reduce, reuse, and recycle.
At Mintz Insurance, we're proud to have been serving our customers for nearly 80 years, offering 30 different insurance products for your auto, home, and business. And to help ensure that you're getting the best rates possible, we give you up to 3 quotes for every policy, so you can choose what's right for you. At Mintz, we're part of the community, local representatives, supporting events, and proud of it. It's part of who we are. Mintz Insurance. Call today and find out how we can help you save on insurance, or visit us at mintzinsurance.com.
In South Jersey, we do things our own way. We say things out loud, face things head on, and never back down. And that's how we fight cancer. With the most advanced diagnostics, leading-edge technology, and a team of doctors who know how to treat your cancer. And most importantly, we do it right here at the Frank and Edith Scarpa Cancer Center, Vineland, and the Leading Edge Cancer Center, Mullica Hill.
More than a century ago, General Tire was born, right here in America. Since then, we've made a name for ourselves by making tires you can depend on. Tires built to handle any road this country can throw at them, and relied on by every kind of driver. So you know that no matter where life takes you, with General Tire, anywhere is possible.
Welcome back to Around South Jersey, and Inspira is one of our major sponsors of our program. And Lou, I've spent, in September I was there for 5 days, and then just about 3 weeks ago I had my gallbladder taken out, so I was in for 4 days. And we both love Inspira. Amy Magazzu and people there just have done a fabulous job. And Glenn Lilly and I were talking, and Glenn was in Atlantic Care for a lung something, they had to drain from him. And Glenn was in 7 days. And he said, Jim, in the 7 days I was in there, he had 4 roommates. I said, you know what? All the days, I was 5 and 4, 9 days I was in Inspira, I had no roommates. It was private room. It was like, oh my God, I love it.
I had also reason to be in Inspira about a year ago. And we're not special. Everybody gets their own room.
Oh, yeah.
It's not because you're Jim Quinn or Lou Magazzu or whatever. No. So let's talk. First of all, I just saw that I finished out completing. There's a gala coming up, I think, in June, Inspira Gala at the Borgata that I'm certainly going to go to and support. But Amy Magazzu. Well, first let me go back before I say Ron Rossi, and Gary Galloway,
right. Yeah,
and many others who don't come to mind, but have been so committed to raising money and doing and hiring good people, and then they brought Amy Magazzu. Well, I've known Amy since the Florio administration.
That's right.
Okay, and she is incredible. She is spectacular. She's smart.
Yeah.
She's caring. I'll tell you a little story about Amy. Inspira is a member of the CEO group, which, as you know, I've been the executive director for almost 10 years, by the way. In 2024 will be 10 years. Our friend Fran has passed away. Can you imagine? He's been gone 10 years.
Oh, my God, no.
So I succeeded our dear friend Fran Riley, God rest his soul. So Amy is standing on the shoulders of people who came before her, and they've all done a great job, including John D'Angelo, who was a character. But Amy is at a different level than anybody who I know in the industry, because there's many, many smart people, there's many good business people, but she has a sense of empathy and a heart that is extraordinary. So the story I wanted to tell you was, in our CEO group, she doesn't make all our meetings. And I called her once and I kind of pulled her leg a little bit. I think maybe when I was sick, telling her how great this hospital was after I got back. And then I said, by the way, we really miss you. And she said, let me tell you why I don't come. She said, I made a commitment when I came in that I would always go to our department head meetings. And most of those meetings are the same Monday you have the CEO group, and I can't go.
Yeah.
So I had to respect that commitment. And I said, well, you could send somebody else, and oftentimes she does. But we are extraordinarily lucky here. And, you know, not only, and I have been both in Vineland and I've been in Mullica Hills Hospital.
Right.
And she's doing great things in Salem County also.
Yeah,
frankly,
just took over the Salem Hospital.
A place that would have, I think, closed for their efforts.
Yeah.
Okay, and to be honest with you, and our mutual friend Ben Laurie, who we both are crazy about, the director of the Board of Commissioners in Salem County, said to me, he said, she is single-handedly, not single-handedly, she is part of a team, but in spirit is single-handedly ensuring that there's health care for Salem County that's at a quality you can get anywhere else, which typically wouldn't be there because of the lack of population.
Exactly.
Not because they're not nice people, not because they're deserving.
There's only
but
60,000 people in the whole
county. At the
county.
end of the day. So kudos to Amy, and I'll see you at the Gala in a couple of weeks. So I was talking about economic development, and I think that's a really important component. Not to be lost on the fact that there's job opportunities working with the colleges, working with job training, working with, you can't really work with high schools because of the age situation, but you can certainly work with adult returning students to make a living that maybe you can't make elsewhere, $15, $20, $25 an hour, and that's just going to expand, and the jobs are going to get better. Communities have the opportunity to get up to 2% of the revenue from each of these places of the gross revenue.
Wow.
Significant money.
Yeah.
Okay? And they also, frankly, can also probably in some instances negotiate additional host benefits that maybe are unique to that community. That is something not to be understated. There's going to soon be delivery and distribution licenses. There are going to be significant opportunities. There are labs. You know, one of the things I would love to see Cumberland County do is get a lab, because as this industry grows, there's a need to test on the quality of the product. And those jobs pay even more. The lab jobs are $30, $40, $50 an hour.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So I think there's two pieces of this economic development tool. And, you know, one of the things you and I both shared when we were at the county and when you were mayor, and you were, I think, without a doubt, the best mayor that Millville ever had.
Thank you.
And I say that with great respect to many other friends who are mayors, but you were Mr. Millville as far as I was concerned. Cumberland County has been, no matter how effort that you put in, I put in, our friend Ed Salmon, no matter who was there, Nick Aselta, whoever it might be, always has had challenges. I see this as an opportunity. And let me tell you why, particularly Cumberland, Salem, and Western Atlantic. Our mutual friend Doug Fisher, the Ag Secretary, who we have known for decades.
We sure have.
And by the way, he's held that position like forever.
Yeah, that's true.
He once told me that Cumberland and Salem County produced 80% of the fruits and vegetables of the state of New Jersey.
Wow.
We are the garden of the garden state.
That's super.
And that's for a number of reasons. Land is cheaper, labor is cheaper,
good point.
Energy is cheaper, water is cheaper. I think those same situations, those same components, are going to allow Cumberland, Salem, and Western Atlantic to be some of the top cultivation areas in the whole state, paying tremendous amount of money. And you know, our farmers are being challenged. They're being challenged by big agri, big farming, They're being challenged by the cost. They're being challenged by the weather changes in the climate. And I'm hopeful that over time the farmers will take that opportunity. There's another corollary to cannabis which is not as successful and not talked about as much, which is hemp, which is which is a cousin of cannabis.
Right.
It doesn't have the same THC levels as cannabis. But hemp growers can also make a really good living. But like anything else, if there's too much of it, it will be bad. But if it comes in a modulated, moderate kind of way over time, I think it presents tremendous, unique opportunities. Because you go up to Hudson, you go up to Bergen, you go up to these other counties, either there's no land or it's millions of dollars an acre.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yes.
So I think there's an opportunity here that we should seize. And to my friends who are skeptical of this, I respect that. But I just say be open-minded. Do the research. See what you find from objective sources. Now, don't necessarily listen to me. We have the capacity to look it up. But I would say look at many sources. Don't look at anybody who's trying to either be pro or con. And I think you'll come to the opinion that this is an opportunity that we in Cumberland County, we in South Jersey, should be taking advantage of.
You're right, Lou, and Salem County has reasonable land in western Atlantic as well. And like you say, I mean, my son lived in Springfield. The land is astronomical. A lot is $500,000. It's so expensive because there isn't any land. We have Marsh River Township's like almost 90 acres of land, and Vineland's 69 square miles, Millville's 45, and a lot of the areas. And it's affordable. It's affordable land for doing the
and again, don't lose sight of the cost that the energy costs are cheaper here,
Yes,
the labor
exactly.
costs are cheaper
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Those components all become a factor. And Jim, you and I are both old enough to remember when we were younger, when the clothing factories were at their heyday,
Sure.
when the glass
Absolutely.
factories were at their
Yes.
heyday,
Yeah.
when the food, when you had Progresso, and in Bridgeton you had
Ritter.
Township. Richard. I mean, you had just and I don't know that we can ever capture all of that. I think the answer to economic development is no silver bullet, but having multiple opportunities, multiple ways to grow the economy. And I think this is one way. I am going to be 66 in September. It's astounding to me. Our friend Gary Wadlinger loves to now talk, and Mike Fisher talk about that I'm an old guy because I was once just a
you were the kid,
young cocker causing everybody heartburn. Chuck Fisher, I fully expect that I will spend the next number of years in my practice, and this will be a very important component of my practice. And I'm delighted to do it. And it's interesting. I am seeing all types of folks from society as I do this, because some of them started with, shall we say, checkered pasts, but they have rehabilitated themselves and they see this as a business opportunity. And others, there's finance people who are investing, by the way, hundreds of millions of dollars.
Wow.
I think I should have done, I had a cheat sheet that I forgot to bring with me, but this is going to be, in New Jersey alone, a multi-billion-dollar industry. Wow. And nationally, tens of billions, probably ultimately hundreds of billions of dollars. Now, one of the things that has happened is those folks who invested in Canada, it's actually a legal stock to trade.
Oh.
It's not, you can't trade it in the States. And those prices have really taken a beating for a couple of reasons, mainly because some places like California, Oklahoma, other states, allowed too many licenses to come out too quickly. There was a saturation of the market. It was supply and demand, and the cannabis went from about $4,000 a ton down to about $4,000 a pound down to $400 a pound.
Wow.
Okay, 90% reduction. They're coming back, and that also I think speaks to the point that sometimes it's good to take your time and do it right, do it slow. Part of the shame of it is that many of these licensees will never get funding because there's just not enough money out there for everything. Plus, there's a slowdown in the economy. 10 years ago, they were putting money into everything, and now people are being more circumspect with the money. But for those people who do, particularly the mom and pops, particularly the smaller operations, not the multinationals, if they operate their business like any other business, they're going to do just fine. And there's tremendous opportunities, and I think that to the extent that we can encourage people to at least be open-minded about it, I think it's not only good for the county, I think it's good for society as a whole.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I mean, especially the economy factor, the economics for this area is going to be tremendous. And that 2% override will go back to the community where they can do things that they would like to do, whatever they want to do with the monies.
And we should not kid ourselves, okay? If it wasn't legal, it's going to be sold illegally.
Yeah.
Okay,
right.
and it's going to be sold in an uncontrolled environment. It's going to be sold in an unregulated environment, an unsupervised environment. In fact, a criminal environment. It makes so much more sense. And again, 200 years ago, people were growing cannabis in their backyard and using it. And they still do, but I mean, it was legal then.
Yeah.
There's, I think, the opportunity to turn something that was bad as a society norm into something that's positive for society, for the reasons we've talked about, for the economics, for the therapeutic on the health, for the ability to relax without turning to alcohol or turning to prescription drugs, which are abused, as we know. Right. This provides, a third way, and a way that I think makes just so much sense for people to consider. Some people don't like to smoke. I actually don't like to smoke. My father was a cigarette smoker for 40 years, and I just remember hating the dirty ashtrays. But there's edibles.
Yeah.
And you have to be careful because they take time to hit you. And you have to understand what you're taking because you could wind up an hour and a half later not knowing, your name. So, and it's important.
Just eat half of the edible.
Not even half. I will tell people, I would say start with 10 or 15%, 20%. Yeah. Start slow.
Right.
Make sure you're not driving anywhere. Make sure you don't have to go anywhere. And just I call it like 2 glasses of wine. It's kind of the equivalent of that.
Okay.
Maybe 3. But you can't drive. You can't, you can't work necessarily. You shouldn't. But if you have the night off, if it's Friday, if it's the weekend, and you want to relax, New Jersey allows you to do it. And again, it's a libertarian in me to say, if you're against it, that's fine, as long as I'm not bothering you or interrupting your home life. You're my neighbor, as long as I'm not. And by the way, for those who remember from the younger days, you're relaxed. You're not boisterous. You're not loud. Yeah. You're not like, if there's a drunken party next door, you know it. If there's a cannabis party next door, you're going to smell things, but people are usually pretty sedate by the end of the night. So, I think it actually makes for probably better neighbors, too.
I remember a friend of mine who recently passed away telling me that, illegally, obviously, he was smoking it, but he said, Jim, I'd drive so careful and I'd sit 10 feet behind the traffic light and just be very, very cautious. But the interesting thing, Lou, that you briefly talked about was, they have like the cigar places where you can all go and sit. And I guess it is going to be legal that they'll have like a cannabis
consumption lounge. They call it.
That's a consumption lounge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now there'll be rules. There'll be rules about odor mitigation. There'll be rules. Again, it won't be near schools. It won't be near parks. It'll be very, very highly regulated. And that's the other thing. There's a sense in the industry that they have to respect the rules because there's so much skepticism.
Yeah, good point.
So people are, not only do they comply with all of these, and I should have brought an application. The application is generally about this thick.
Wow.
Okay, and it's not only that you need to comply with the regulators to get the application. You need to comply subsequently. Okay, they're not going to let you.
Right.
And there's going to be, under this administration, particularly because Governor Murphy brought it in, and I think even for all administrations, there's going to be an intense focus on you better do what you promised you're going to do.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you're going to get your license yanked.
Right. Yeah.
And I go back to gaming and what we've learned from that piece of the puzzle. And I think you'll see consumption lounges. I think they'll come slowly. Mm-hmm. I think that towns are going to be even more reluctant to do that than retail or cultivation.
Yeah.
So it's going to, but I think you'll see it in Atlantic City first.
Yeah,
I think you'll see a lot of it in
that's
Atlantic City.
a very good point.
And now,
yeah.
by the way, you can't own a casino license and own a cannabis license.
No, I can see where that would be.
So what's that going to do? I think that's going to provide high-end, really classy consumption lounges a block or two away from the Hard Rock.
Right.
A block, and it's got to be on Atlantic Avenue.
Right.
A block or two away from the Hard Rock or Tropicana or Caesars, and I think they'll be really top flight. Now, you mentioned our friend Glenn Lilly, who was just, by the way, Pally, right?
He's
one of the best. One of the best.
Vice president of Claridge Casino Hotel for many years.
Well, the Claridge now is going to have because they're not a casino anymore.
Oh, that's right.
They're going to have a consumption lounge, and I've not been there, but I understand it is gorgeous, and it'll be on that type of level. I think that'll be also part of the revitalization of Atlantic City. If you go to Las Vegas, and as I've done a number of times for my research, as I call it, there's all types of places, but there are really some very nice places. What New Jersey has to deal with is this prohibition against food. And then ultimately they're going to have to deal with alcohol, but I think that will be down the road. But I think they have to allow food at consumption lounges because it just doesn't make any sense.
And I agree with you, Lou, because like at the craft beer place in Millville, people want to go have a craft beer. What they were doing, and I think they were putting in food trucks outside so people could go. But this certainly, and I understand, but they're going to need to have some food, some munchies.
You've got to make a decision whether you want to do it halfway or all the way.
Right.
And the other thing that we haven't talked about, it's a real problem in New York City, and I've spoken a number of times in New York now. Literally every bodega on every street is selling every block is selling cannabis illegally.
Oh, okay.
Illegally.
Wow.
Okay.
Holy cow.
And they need to shut them down. Fortunately, New Jersey, I think, is more disciplined in that regard because if you're asking another person to pay, do all these regulations, have all these standard operating procedures, have all this security, and have somebody here who's not doing any of that and selling illegally, it's just not fair. One negative thing about cannabis, because it's federally illegal, it's not federally, you can't deduct your cost, your business expenses.
Oh, okay.
Something called 280E.
Gotcha.
That's something they're going to have to work on. They can't even, it's difficult to bank. There's locally.
Yeah, doesn't it have to go through like a state
locally,
bank or something?
First Harvest Credit Union and Park Bank. It has to be a state bank. It can't be a federally chartered bank because it's federally illegal.
Yeah.
But they're the two that in South Jersey that are assisting. There's some in North Jersey, also in Central Jersey. There's something called the Safe Banking Act that I'm working on with Senator Booker and a number of other members of Congress that will allow you to bank in cannabis because right now it's a challenge.
Yeah, I'll bet you.
And that becomes a problem.
Yeah. Well, Lou, the hour flew by, which I knew it would. It's always great to have you here.
Great to be here.
Someday I got to get you back for election night because Lou was really good doing.
Well, we'll see about that. It's but I will, if available, happy to come. The last couple of election nights, I've actually been invited to people's headquaters. So
I'm telling you,
I go and do that.
Yeah, that's what's happened with Nick too. Nick Aseldo is one of my other good people that help with election nights, but he. Yeah, obviously, and I understand you want to be at headquarters and celebrate with the victors and all that kind of stuff.
Next time we're on, I'll tell you about how do we have any more time? We're almost done.
You can take.
I was at Governor Murphy's headquarters election night.
Oh, okay.
A half hour into it, I said, "This is a problem. You guys are in trouble." Remember, he only won by 50,000 votes, and he looked at me like I had two heads because they had polling and this and that. I said, "Folks, this reminds me of 1991 and Governor Jim Florio, who you remember lost by 1,700 votes.
I lose in the ones, 81, 91, 2000.
Well, you better stay away from that 2031 election day. So I said to them, "You're in trouble. You're in trouble." An hour in, they call me up to their conference room and say, "What did you know?" I said, "I've just lived through this." And ultimately, it was and of course, Jack Ciattarelli was a tremendous candidate, wonderful individual, but when you're around long enough, you get a feel for it. Sometimes, particularly when it's not yours.
Yeah, that's
okay,
true.
You get a feel for it. Jim, it was a pleasure. It's always a ball.
Thanks,
love to do it again.
I'd love to have you back. Thank you. And I want to thank Mike Magazzu, who came by and is helping out there. And Mike does a fantastic job at the New Jersey Motor Vehicle Department in Vineland. Everybody I talk to has nothing but praise for Mike. So, Mike, thank you for the great job you do as well. And Lou, it's always good to see you. Lou Magazzu has been our guest here. We're talking about cannabis and some other good things, politics a little bit as well. And George Cucci, I thank you for producing the show tonight. And for Lou Magazzu, I'm Jim Quinn. Have a good night. Take care. Bye-bye.
More than a century ago, General Tire was born, right here in America. Since then, we've made a name for ourselves by making tires you can depend on. Tires built to handle any road this country can throw at them, and relied on by every kind of driver. So you know that no matter where life takes you, with General Tire, anywhere is possible.
This has been a QBC television production, in association with our partners and sponsors. QBC broadcasts on Comcast Cable Channel 22, and live streams its programming on Facebook and YouTube. All rights reserved by Quinn Media and QBC, programming that serves the South Jersey market.